Welcome to Right Talk with Mike Lee. I hope you enjoyed the introduction as much as I did. It's a nice thing to look back over people who have been involved in your life. I believe that, it's just personal belief I have, I believe that you have two families, the one you're born into and the one that you experienced during the course of your life. And my introductory video covers much of that. It begins with my mom and ends with my very best friend, who I lost both of whom I lost last year. Tonight I was going to, I had two potential guests. No one has showed up as of yet. So you may be subjected just to much of my personal, what my personal beliefs are. And the opinions and beliefs I express are mine, no one else's. They're not programmed or anything like that. But I had planned to do a show on Planned Parenthood, and I have several video clips that I hope my audience will look at and enjoy and take in the sense that I hope they are presented. That is to educate, inform, and educate and inform. And you form your own opinions based on the information that you see. I'm back in the saddle. I got my sunglasses back, so I feel kind of normal for me, as normal as I can be anyway. But in any event, this show is really going to be about Planned Parenthood. I have some strong opinions about Planned Parenthood, and I think they'll come through in the clips. The election of President Donald J. Trump has ushered in interesting political times. While he was once a Democrat and contributed to their causes, perhaps causing some Republicans some concern, this might have particularly been the case as there are numerous photographs of President Trump and when he was acquainted with the Clintons on a friendly, personal, or professional basis. And perhaps just because he was once a Democrat, as was Reagan, and as I was at one point. As a matter of fact, my beginning in politics, I worked in Democratic campaigns. I worked on leading for Congress. I worked for Jack Brooks. I worked with John Hamm, who ran for Attorney General of Texas. So my early political training was on the Democratic side of the fence. But in that experience, I learned that they really had a gay agenda way back in 1980, or even before that. And that was not my cup of tea. But getting back to President Trump, since Trump's election, Democrats have lost their collective minds. They're shooting people. They're shooting at conservative legislators, and God knows what else they're doing. Maybe they're upset because they don't have enough transgender bathrooms. I guess we didn't get the bathrooms put in time. But perhaps because President Trump was once a Democrat and contributed to their causes, maybe this is why some conservatives, such as myself, some had some doubts about him. I never did. As a matter of fact, when he was coming down the escalator, I was talking to a good friend of mine, Marjorie Malone, and I bet her $100 at that point that he was going to win. She has since told me she's not going to pay me $100 for winning the bet, but she'll pay me $100 for anything else but not winning the bet. But the passage of time has established that the president is indeed a conservative. And to me, he's a conservative in the vein of Harry S. Truman, who used common sense. And I think that the last thing that the country needed was just another politician. And actually, Trump probably came across as the anti-establishment candidate in the last election. But I think 6 months before the election, I had a sense that there would be people voting for Trump who probably never voted before in their life. And I had that experience because I was at a gas station somewhere, and I spoke to a lady, and she said that she didn't discuss politics. And I had a patriotic book for children, and I showed her the book, and when I revealed to her that I was doing volunteer work for the Travis County Republican Party, she opened up it was like I had a new friend. And at that moment, I knew that there was an undercurrent of support for Trump. And I've since learned that during the exit polling on the last election day, in the general election, there are people who voted for Trump but were afraid to say that they voted for Trump. And I attribute that to pretty much the bullying and intimidation tactics that have been used by liberals for years. They have completely bamboozled the African-American community to such an extent that the African-American community votes heavily Democratic. I think Barack Obama got 97% of the African-American vote, I believe. He never got my vote, but and I believe Hillary got about 88 or 89%. But I believe that that African Americans vote for Democrats because they think they care. At least that's what they say, and they act real friendly with them. Because some people they prefer affection rather than respect. I rather have respect personally. Because you can't take affection to the bank. And affection does you no good if it doesn't show you any tangible benefit. And as far as I'm concerned, the liberals have had about 50 or 60 years to show where voting what liberals are interested in is going to benefit the black community. And by and large, it has not. The situation has not changed. Rather than have improved conditions and independence, we have a lot of dependence rather than independence. Economically and politically and socially, things have not changed very much. What we have are really big urban, I think, urban plantations. They call them urban areas. But they're largely pretty much dominated by African Americans and Hispanics. And their living conditions and the overall situation is not up to par in terms of how you might characterize the so-called majority community. In any event, I believe that President Trump has demonstrated himself to be a true conservative, particularly in his appointments to the courts and whatnot, and particularly in the ideas and approaches that he expresses. President Trump what he's done is he's challenged these notions of political correctness that the Republican establishment was inept at challenging. And actually, in my view, President Trump ran against the Republicans. He ran against, my little brother was joking because I think at one point it was 17 candidates for the Republican nomination. Trump beat all of them. So he ran against basically the Republican establishment and the Democrats. He's like his own individual third party in a sense. But one of the things that I respected and admired about President Trump was his position on abortion, his position on Planned Parenthood. I think he's been trying to get Planned Parenthood defunded ever since he hit the White House. He hasn't been successful yet, but perhaps it may change. I know that I think a couple of weeks ago, there was a court in Spain that ruled that Planned Parenthood was not really serving the public interest. And one thing that I know, Planned Parenthood is not serving the best interests of the black community. Now the fact that Planned Parenthood really is a successor to the eugenics movement, I believe. The eugenics movement was something that developed after the slaves were freed and as a way of dealing with the Negro problem. And what Planned Parenthood started out as I think the American Abortion League or something like that. But about 1942, they changed the name to Planned Parenthood. And it kind of took the place of eugenics, which was about population control. Basically, what to do with the people who are descendants of the freed slaves, which is us, black people. Now, the president's conservative spin is nowhere more evident than his pro-life stance, his determination to defund Planned Parenthood, based on his idea that life begins at conception. Now, there's a video that I'd like to see. One thing, the first video is going to be on is going to indicate that the leading cause of death in the black community is abortion, not diabetes, not heart disease, but abortion. And through abortion, the net result is the African American population in this country is the only voting demographic that is shrinking. It's getting smaller, and mainly because of abortion. I believe that abortion in many instances in the black community is used as a form of birth control. It's could be an expensive way of having birth control, and I believe it could happen after a woman gets pregnant and then later decides that she doesn't want to have the child, and responsibilities and burdens that come with it. Now, there's a video clip that's come from a movie called Maafa 21, which I strongly urge all of my viewers to watch. It's available on YouTube in small sections. It's about 2 hours long in total. I'll show parts of it on this show, but I hope my producers can put this clip up. That is a short portion of it, talking about the cause of death.
What would you say is now the #1 cause of death in the African American community?
Heart disease.
Oh, HIV/AIDS.
Diabetes, cancer, AIDS.
I'll say heart disease.
AIDS.
From what I heard, it's probably AIDS, you know.
Probably heart disease.
I think heart disease.
HIV, gang violence.
What if I told you the real answer was abortion?
Since 1973, legal abortion has killed more African Americans than AIDS, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and violent crime combined. Every week, more blacks die in American abortion clinics than were killed in the entire Vietnam War. And the largest chain of abortion clinics in the United States is operated by Planned Parenthood.
And what that short clip showed is the pernicious effect of the abortion practices on the black community. As I've said earlier, the African American community and black vote is the only shrinking demographic in the nation. And this, even though this is a reality, inexplicably, in my view, Planned Parenthood is routinely supported by so-called black leadership. Now, in my view, no true revolutionary would endorse or support a policy that would reduce its own political, economic, and social power. But nevertheless, this is exactly what happens. Beginning with, in the early 1960s, the black movement then recognized the genocidal effects of the abortion practices and policies. In fact, Jesse Jackson himself recognized it, but when Jesse Jackson found that he could get the support of Planned Parenthood for his bid for presidency, his position changed from that of seeing abortion as a form of genocide to a woman's right to choose. Now, I was in law school when this woman's right to choose business kind of first started gaining a lot of traction, a lot of ground. And I figured it appeared to me that the woman's right to choose, the ones out there making all the noise, were Caucasian, white women. Because in the black community, many women worked. In my neighborhood where I grew up in Lincoln Heights, many of the adult women in my neighborhood, my friends' mothers and sisters, my own mother, they worked as domestic. They were domestic workers, cleaning the homes, ironing the clothes, and caring for the children of white people in surrounding neighborhoods. My neighborhood was pretty much all black, 16,000, but we were surrounded by Reading, Woodlawn, Evendale, and Laughlin, which were predominantly white neighborhoods, and Wyoming. And so black women were working or were doing things to earn money to support the family. And so to me, this woman's right to choose, to me, really looked like a white woman's movement. And I believe that, when Obama was president, I believe that he said one of the first things he wanted to do as president was to bring back partial birth abortion. Now, I've always wanted to show, I haven't done it yet, but I sure like to show a picture of partial birth abortion. When they say partial birth abortion, it makes it sound like kind of clinical. They don't tell you they deliver the child, crack open the skull, suck out the brains, and harvest the body parts. Now, Planned Parenthood is a multi-billion-dollar, multinational enterprise. I mentioned earlier that the branch in Spain was recently declared not to serve the public interest. Now, no wonder they have them in Spain. And Martha Sanger, who was really the founder and the driver behind Planned Parenthood, she was invited to speak in many foreign countries. because it was abortion was regarded as a way of controlling the population and keeping population down to make sure there were adequate resources on earth for people to live. I believe that Margaret Sanger said that she was motivated by a desire not to see people suffer. I guess if they never make it into the world, they never suffer. But the idea behind partial birth abortion, as I said, it sounds rather clinical, but it's really a barbaric practice, really murder. It's recognized that it's a life, but I believe it was it Hillary. I think Hillary mentioned that until a baby can sustain itself outside the mother, you can kill it. And the idea of a woman's right to choose, you can choose now. If you choose to kill an adult, that's murder. If you choose to kill a human that has not emerged from the fetus, I guess that's they want to legalize murder. But that's actually what happens. But the thing that I find most disturbing is the Democratic African American leaders virtually take an oath of allegiance to Planned Parenthood based on a woman's right to choose and ignore its effects on the community that they supposedly represent. Now, you would think that as politicians, they would want a bigger base. But abortion is the way the policies and practices are executed, it keeps that base from growing. And so we're reducing, the leaders vote for policies and practices that reduce their own potential base. But they participate in this, I guess, because for their own personal, their own personal agendas. And I noticed that lately, these black leaders, in short, they just sell out. Now, the fact that the black population is not growing exponentially as some other populations kind of confirms the fact that abortion is having a negative effect on our communities. And needless to say, we do know that we don't have separate societies now, but we do have separate and unequal families. And I believe that is the problem that we face. But abortion's effect and impact I believe, is just as powerful, if not more powerful, than the prison pipeline on the black community. But make no mistake about it, Planned Parenthood is powerful economically and politically. I guess that's why this Republican administration is having a difficult time trying to defund Planned Parenthood. I think it's going to happen at some point, though. Now, there's another clip. If we can pull it up, the one about where Obama basically swears allegiance to Planned Parenthood and indicates that it is the interest of Planned Parenthood that is number one on his list, not the interest of the black community. Can we have that clip, please? It's pretty short.
What would you do as president? Fix the economy, end the war, restore our schools?
Well, the first thing I'd do as president is sign the Freedom of Choice Act.
Really? Obama's top priority as president will be a law to reinstate partial birth abortion, eliminate parental notification, and force taxpayers to fund abortions?
On this fundamental issue, I will not yield, and Planned Parenthood will not yield.
Now, if that's job one, item one on your agenda, and that adversely affects the people that you supposedly represent, that makes no sense. But as I mentioned earlier, to my knowledge, and it seems that the African American community supported Barack Obama at a rate of about 97%, despite the fact that the first thing he wanted to do, they weren't first on his list. He was first on their list, but they weren't first on his list. What was first on his list was Planned Parenthood. Not the black neighborhood, Planned Parenthood. To me, that speaks volumes. And the other thing that Planned Parenthood does is it's in the business of marketing body parts. And if these abortions are disproportionately affecting the black community, that suggests to me that most of those body parts would be the body parts of African Americans So we're talking about body parts of African Americans being used as commodities to keep some other people alive. You're killing black people to keep some other people alive. That makes no sense to me. And I think it's just tragic, and the fact that President Trump opposes this practice, to me, suggests that in a left-handed kind of way, he's more pro-black than Obama. And if I told most of my friends that, they probably want to get in the fight with me, which is fine with me too. But I don't think that people in the black community are sufficiently informing themselves of the effect and impact that abortion has on the lives of the community at large. And instead, they, I guess, they call themselves being friends with the white liberal establishment, whoever they are. But to me, it's sad and tragic at the same time, because it's like you're being pimped, you're being hustled. There's another clip that talks about the abortion practices by Ben Shapiro. In fact, if we could pull that up.
If you're like 7 in 10 Americans, you probably haven't heard anything at all about Planned Parenthood killing unborn babies and then selling their body parts to the highest bidder. You've probably heard about a random dentist killing a magic lion out in Zimbabwe. You've probably heard about Miley Cyrus's armpit hair, but the media don't want you to know that your tax dollars are funding the mass murder and organ harvesting of actual children in the womb. I'm Ben Shapiro, and this is Hardwired. So, why are the media covering up the brutality of Planned Parenthood? Because it might make you uncomfortable. Worse, it might make Democrats uncomfortable, because Democrats love Planned Parenthood. The Democratic Party platform stands for the ability of a woman to crush her baby's head 1 minute before birth, and they want you to pay for it. It's actually in their platform. Quote, Democratic Party strongly and unequivocally supports Roe v. Wade and a woman's right to make decisions regarding her pregnancy, including a safe and legal abortion, regardless of ability to pay. President Obama, as a state senator in Illinois, he actually called for a fully formed living baby to be killed after birth. He said such a child was merely a fetus outside of the mother's womb. That's how Democrats think. We have it on gruesome tape. Here's a top Planned Parenthood doctor talking about how to use less crunchy techniques to kill babies so that their organs can be more easily sold.
How he feels about using a less crunchy technique to get more whole specimens.
And here's another top Planned Parenthood doctor talking about the ease with which baby intestines can be harvested and eyeballs can be extracted.
These orbits are good too, because at this stage you start to get the retinal pigment epithelium, which is in the back, which is you've collected that before.
So all the orbits are so easy.
It's just delightful. A third top Planned Parenthood doctor negotiated over baby body part prices while standing over a tray of dissected children.
I think the per item thing works a little better, just because we can see how much we can get out of it.
Now, naturally, Hillary Clinton thinks the people who do this are just wonderful.
I'm proud to stand with Planned Parenthood.
But when Hillary Clinton is shown video of Planned Parenthood doctors talking about selling organs, even she pretends to find it, quote, disturbing. People who claim they're disturbed by the sale of baby organs, but are totally fine with the crushing of their heads, are moral idiots. It's like saying you're disturbed by the whipping of American slaves, but not by anyone holding them as slaves in the first place. Here's the truth. Abortion ends a human life. The science is settled. By 3 weeks after sperm meets egg, the baby's brain, spinal cord, heart, and other organs begin forming. That's about the time when most women notice they're pregnant in the first place. By week 4, we've got early facial features. By week 7, the baby has toes. By week 9, the baby is developing external genitalia. By week 10, the baby has started growing fingernails. And that's all in the first trimester. That's the least controversial abortion period. But we treat these innocent human lives as junk for the garbage disposal. During the first 3 months of pregnancy, doctors plunge a tube with an edged tip into the womb. They then use the suction power of the tube to literally tear apart the child while it's alive, and then suck the pieces out of the mother's womb. This is called suction aspiration. Unpleasant? Try dilation and curettage. In this version of abortion, doctors use a curette, which chops up the baby inside the womb and then scrapes it right out. As the baby grows, the methods of abortion get uglier and uglier. There's dilation and evacuation, in which doctors use a forceps to crush the baby, including its brain and spine. The pieces are then removed. And as a last resort, doctors use partial birth abortion. Democrats love partial birth abortion. This is a procedure in which doctors use an ultrasound. They find a baby's legs with the forceps. They pull it into the birth canal. They deliver the entire baby except for the head. And then they stab the baby in the skull with the scissors, insert a suction tube into the skull, and suck out the brains. This is also the preferred method for ensuring that the internal organs are best preserved, so Planned Parenthood can hawk them to Big Pharma. Taken in total, these various forms of abortion and others are used to murder approximately 3,000 babies every single day in America. That's over 1 million babies a year. That's 55 million children since Roe v. Wade. The media want to keep us blind to these facts, or perhaps we want to blind ourselves. But by blinding ourselves to murder, we become complicit in it.
If abortion disproportionately affects the black community, and if it is in fact the leading cause of death in the black community, it makes no sense whatsoever that it would be supported by African American politicians. And it makes no sense for any African American politician who really cares about his people to oppose President Trump's desire to defund Planned Parenthood. Because if Planned Parenthood is defunded and abortions are not disproportionately affecting the black community, maybe the black population would begin to grow. Now, to me, I don't know that that is the act of a racist. To me, that the racist would be the one who's really trying to exterminate people. And to me, if you're supposed to be leading the people, it doesn't make common sense to try to support policies that would lead to that people's reduction or extermination. Now, if when in those instances when Planned Parenthood is actually investigated and filmed doing these things, in many instances, rather than Planned Parenthood being prosecuted, the entity being prosecuted is the person who's revealing what Planned Parenthood is doing. Actually doing it. The murder is actually taking place. I believe that happened down in Houston because there was a report about what Planned Parenthood was doing, and instead of going after Planned Parenthood, I believe that the district attorney's office went after the people who were reporting it, not Planned Parenthood. And so to me, this speaks volumes for who is concerned about what. Now, if conservatives, such as myself and supposedly the racist Republicans, I believe that most African Americans, you can disconnect their brains just by saying the word Republican. You can say Donald Trump, that causes them to stop thinking. You can say Republican, that causes them to stop thinking. Because, I partially blame that on those in the black community responsible for educating people, and I partially blame that on those conservatives on the Republican side of the House who are not opening their mouths. For over half a century, we've had a situation where liberals are defining who conservatives are. They're demonizing us, actually. A couple of years ago, I was in a parade, the first Juneteenth parade here, the Republican Party was in Travis County, and we were riding in the parade, and someone looked and said, "Oh, Republican Party, write me a check." That's exactly what they did. First they said, "What are you doing here?" And then they say, "Write me a check." And to me, that shows the kind of government dependency attitude that's been allowed to grow and perpetuate in the African American community to its detriment. Here in Austin, it's particularly interesting because this is supposed to be a liberal bastion of sorts, a liberal paradise. It's a liberal paradise, but the black community has been systematically destroyed here. First, I believe it's 1925 or 1928, there was, by city ordinance, the area west of 35 was pretty much a white area, and the area east of 35 was pretty much a black area. But as time has passed, the east side was closer to town, and I believe that the liberals, the progressives, decided, well, we want this part that's closer to town. And on the east side of Austin, which used to be, I understand, wall-to-wall black and Hispanic, is now, as I put it, the bicycle lanes come in and the black people go out. And as I ride through I come through the east side on my way to the station, I can count the number of black folks I've seen riding bicycles in these bicycle lanes on one hand. And so who are those lanes for? And the policies, the taxing policies real estate is high here and taxes are high. And basically, the African American community has been taxed out of Austin. The African American community has moved mainly to Pflugerville. Now they're moving to Manor, but they're moving away from Austin. Austin is going to turn into a yuppie white haven. The Monaco and the Colorado is I expect Austin to turn into because of its taxing policies. And its policies are used to, when Councilman Zimmerman was on the council, I was on the African American Resource Advisory Commission. I know he tried to work very closely with Orr Houston to try to do things to try to spur growth on the eastern part of Travis County. Because they were talking about building a new courthouse, and he suggested that courthouse annexes be built on the east side to encourage development and growth on that side. But that's not what happened. But the problem I see politically is that the Republican establishment hasn't opened its mouth. And that's why I appreciate President Trump taking on anybody and everybody. He's taking on everybody, really. He's taking on Democrats, taking on Republicans, and anyone in sight, which is a good thing. Competition is supposed to be a good thing. And it's supposed to be what conservatives are about. But what has happened is, I think the notions and ideas of political correctness and not wanting to offend anyone pretty much neutralized the Republicans. So you really had Democrats and then Republicans like Democrats light. Just something the opposite of what liberals would say, without opening their mouths. And at the same time allowed liberals to say who they are. They demonize us. I've been in situations where to say that you're Republican, the first thing black people say about you is like you're a traitor to your race. Now actually the traitors are those who would support policies that would serve to reduce the black population rather than those who want to grow the black population to grow. And I believe President Trump captured it very well during his campaign when he said, what have you got to lose? And somehow when Trump said, what have you got to lose, everybody got mad. Now I think that, I hope that, I think I got one more clip I think, where blacks rallied against Planned Parenthood out in L.A. Did we have that clip? Oh, you didn't have that? Mm-hmm. There was a clip that I reviewed personally where blacks rallied against Planned Parenthood and couldn't get anywhere. And I think it's because we suffer an information deficit, I believe, in the African American community, particularly with respect to growing the population and where Planned Parenthood is concerned. And it's really having a devastating effect over the long run because our population is not growing. I believe I read a book by Dr. John Butler, who's a professor over here at the University of Texas at the Business Graduate School, I believe. I think in the 1930s there were like 11 million blacks. And you're going to tell me right now that since 1930, that's what, 70 years, almost 100 years, that the population has only increased about 3 million? And if abortion is keeping our numbers down, then to me, it seems to me that that's a practice that we as a community would want to stop. Now, most African Americans probably came up like I came up. In many instances, you went to a Baptist church, and so you have basically conservative values, But that's not how we're voting. Because it seems that the African American community votes based on emotion. It seems that they vote based on, oh, this white person likes me, and this white person that likes me said that white person there doesn't like me, so I'm gonna vote for this. I'm gonna go with this person that say they like me. Now, saying you liking me is one thing. Now, talking good is good, but doing good is better. And I believe what conservatives have to do is show that they care. On the one hand, you have the liberal side, they say they care. And then you have the conservative side of the house, they're not saying anything. And the liberal side of the house saying, because they're not saying anything because they don't care. And what conservatives need to do is start showing that they care. Not merely saying things, but showing. And I believe that taking a stance against abortion is one way of showing it. But because of the amount of publicity, negative publicity that conservatives have gotten, and negative messages that have been sent to the neighborhood, and without any contradictory information, that is one of the reasons why there's such a deficit for conservatives. But it can be made up over time. It can be made up if there's a concerted effort to get messages out. And I love my conservative brothers of another color, but I am very disappointed because there's not a lot of organized work to change the narrative and change the perception. I believe we got that clip. I think I got that clip.
We've been seeing these videos released on Planned Parenthood where they are performing these abortions and selling the baby parts for profit. At Bond, we are rebuilding the family by rebuilding the man. Planned Parenthood is killing off the men even before they have a chance to develop. They're destroying families even before they have a chance to live. So we decided we're gonna do something about it. This past Saturday, we had our first rally in front of Planned Parenthood in the downtown South Central LA area. My PR guy says to me, hey, Jesse, why don't you go in and talk to the manager, introduce yourself, talk to them. I said, oh, that's a good idea. So I, along with my camera guy, went into the lobby of the abortion clinic. Sir, may you leave, please? All right, I just need to talk to the manager or somebody. I said, I'd like to just talk to the manager to find out why they're killing these children. Do they feel any guilt about killing black babies? And at this point, when we turned around and we're talking to the young girl, one Hispanic girl was there and she attacked my camera guy and tried to take the camera away from him. I mean, it just hell going on at this point. The other girls start hiding their faces, and we just left. We finally left, and then later I saw the security guard outside on the sidewalk, and we had a nice little talk, and I told him, we're sorry, we didn't mean to do it. We're just trying to get the information out. We want to help, and we will be back. We are committed to saving as many unborn lives as possible. We want Congress to defund Planned Parenthood. If you want to get involved, this is a perfect issue to deal with, especially if you live in the Los Angeles area. We are here in Los Angeles, and we're asking you to come and join us to fight this battle to save the lives of the unborn. You should be active. You have no reason now not to do it. Every child deserves a chance to live, and they're not getting that right now. And that's why we're doing this. So come on down and join us and get involved with this issue. I tried carrying the weight of the world, but I
have personally wondered, and I guess professionally wondered from a political standpoint, what happens in the mind of the usual African American who votes Democratic. They go to church on Sunday, and they hear all this good stuff about Jesus and Christianity, and they pray, take all day, like they're going to work on a plantation or something. And then on the second Tuesday in November, go vote Democratic like that didn't happen. And there has to be a disconnect somewhere. And so my position has really evolved to become, vote your values. because your values tell who you are and what's important to you. And if you value life, I know that, what was it, a couple of months ago, I started a lot of skirmishes on Facebook deliberately because I'm always trying to learn and look at different perspectives and different points of view. But I have a good friend who's a nurse in, I think it's Springfield, Ohio. We got into a discussion, Facebook discussion, so to speak, about abortion. And she gave a very clinical approach, but then a couple of months later, she put something on Facebook about how she felt her pregnant daughter's stomach and felt the baby move, and she was moved by that. Now, if a baby is moving in the stomach, but then at the same time, 2 months before, she said it can't sustain life outside the womb, so that means as long as it's in the womb, you can kill it? It's not alive? Everyone realizes it's a life, but to me, legalized abortion is basically legalized murder because you are taking a life. As a child develops brain and nerves and things like that in like 3 to 6 weeks. And so, if you can deliver that child, crack open the skull, suck out the brains, and then harvest the eyes, the liver, the this, the that, and if it's disproportionately affecting black people, then you're actually taking a black life and perhaps giving life to someone else against the interests of the black community. But the Congressional Black Caucus routinely supports Planned Parenthood blindly just as much as maybe it's not blind, maybe they're getting something out of the deal. Maybe they're getting support for their campaign. I noticed that that's what Jesse Jackson did. But they sell out their own. What revolutionary, supposedly, would sell out his own people? It makes no sense to me. Makes no sense whatsoever. Unless it's done to advance some own personal agenda, aside from those of the people you supposedly represent. As far as I'm concerned, those people, they're just pimping and hustling. They're getting what they can get at the expense of the community. The community is suffering. In Austin, the community is disappearing. But we do have one African. We have one black on council here, or Houston. She's been on my show, and she's Democratic. But actually, I think she nominated a conservative guy, Mike Cargill, to some board, and they turned him down. No reason given why. I have Mike come on the show and talk about it. But it seems to me that the black community should be open to trying something new. If what you're doing hasn't worked in 50 years, the chance of it working the next day probably are not too good. And if you have changing circumstances and changing times, you should at least begin to think, maybe I need to change my strategy a little bit. But if you're constantly being emotionally pulled in this direction and that direction, then you don't have time to think. One of the things that you learn on the street early is if you're trying to persuade someone to do something, you don't give them time to think. You keep them busy. You keep them stirred up. That way, if they don't have time to think, then they don't have time to evaluate things. And I don't believe that as a community, as a black community as a whole, is evaluating exactly what's going on and exactly what's in my best interest. I don't think the best interest of the black community is served by arguing about transgender bathrooms. I just don't. And I don't think that it squares very much with the Judeo-Christian teachings that occurs in most African American churches. But this is the kind of thing that, for some reason or other, the community votes for. And I figure that it must be based on emotion, not reason. And we got to get back. I think we as a people, the black community has to realize that we are the descendants of black Africa. Now, I know Obama's minister said Egypt wasn't Africa. I beg to differ. I think most of the study confirms that life pretty much began in Africa, I mean, that's where the pyramids are. Those kind of some of the old structures on the earth. And they were not built by Caucasians in the caves of France. They weren't built in China. They were built in Africa, and they're still there. And so we have to regain a sense of self and a sense of community, and stop hating ourselves and hating each other. Now, one thing, as a black conservative, I'm pretty much known for being conservative. As a matter of fact, my good friend Richard Franklin, through whom I've met most of the good people I know in Austin through Richard. I remember when I first, Richard has these meetings on Wednesday that I go to. One time Richard said, Mike, I'm glad you're in town. He said, people have somebody to hate other than me. But he's pretty much right. You know, I get a lot of negative reactions from people because of my conservative beliefs. But I believe that my beliefs are consistent with my Christian upbringing. I believe I try to do a lot of things with my mother said. Not enough of them according to her. Probably not enough according to me either. But that's the way it goes. But back to Planned Parenthood. I think Planned Parenthood is the worst thing to happen to the African American community. And I note that here in Austin, there's a Planned Parenthood facility. There's a HBCU here, Houston-Tillotson University. There's a Planned Parenthood facility right across the street. Now, I know there may be real estate economic reasons for that. Property may have been cheaper and all of that. But I haven't seen a Planned Parenthood on UT's campus, and it's huge. Now, if Planned Parenthood was somewhere near that tower where the shooting happened on UT, I'd understand. But I've walked through there and driven through there. I haven't seen a Planned Parenthood facility there. But I do see one at Houston-Tillotson. Why? And I believe that research would indicate that most Planned Parenthood facilities are located in or near large urban populations. This is no accident, particularly if urban populations are predominantly black and Hispanic. It's no accident. As I said, there could be some economic reasons for that. But I think I don't care what the economic reasons are, the intent and the effect of abortion is to negatively affect the African American population. To me, that in and of itself is reason enough for a so-called black president or so-called black leader to be opposed to these abortion practices and the woman's right to choose. Now what is attempted to try to make it seem equitable and fair is, well, we'll make it so that everybody can get it. And actually, as a matter of fact, Planned Parenthood, there's a clip I don't have tonight, but there's a clip where a guy calls in who wants to contribute to Planned Parenthood, and he wants his money, he wants to specifically donate for the abortion of black children, because he doesn't want his white child to be disadvantaged by affirmative action and things like that. And Planned Parenthood will gladly accept that money and will make sure it's dedicated to that purpose. If that doesn't show you what the intent is, that means that a obviously racially motivated person can basically contract with the Planned Parenthood to get a black baby aborted. I want to pay for a black child to be aborted. I want to make sure it goes to a black person, so that my white child won't be disadvantaged by having this black person live. And so if black lives truly matter, wouldn't black lives matter in the womb? You're saying black lives matter on the street but don't matter in the womb? What person, who is more vulnerable? Who is the most vulnerable person in the world? The one who has not been able to make it into the world yet. And if we're creating circumstances where making it into this world is difficult, we're creating very bad circumstances. And to me, for any decent, self-respecting black person to endorse and to support that kind of policy, he's obviously not for his people. Now, when Obama was president, if item one was, let's have partial birth abortion, I think Hillary said that abortion is okay until that fetus can sustain itself outside the womb. But what partial birth abortion does is it prevents the baby from getting outside the womb. It never has a chance. Because while it's in the room, you partially deliver it, crack open the skull, suck out his brains, it's dead. You killed it. So it can't survive outside the womb because you sucked the brains out, because you killed it. And I don't care any kind of way you shake it, I believe that it's murder. It's undoubtedly the taking of a human life. And the taking of a human life is murder. It reminds me of my Sunday school days. I remember reading about at some point they were going to kill all the babies under 2 years old because they wanted to make sure Jesus didn't make it. But it's essentially the same thing. If you kill the baby while it's in the womb, it never has a chance to survive outside the womb because you're denying it the opportunity. And what can be more vicious and barbaric than that, than to take the life of an unborn child? An unborn child should have rights. Should have a right to at least get out and give it a shot. And on a spiritual basis, you don't know who or what that is you're aborting. There have been, I think that's why they were quiet about Tebow. Kaepernick kneeled to about social inequities. Tim Tebow kneeled and basically in prayer to God. They ignored that totally. I want to thank you for listening to me mouth off for 58 minutes and 30 seconds, and I apologize that my guest didn't show up. I hoped he might show up at any moment. But thank you for joining me, and I thank the. If you go to my Facebook page, it's much of what it repeats much of what I said tonight, and you can Google me at Right Talk with Mike Lee, and you can see my other 43 or 44 episodes.